The coronavirus pandemic continues apace. We'll take a look at some of the medical issues, but also some of the politics, some of the hysteria, just a little bit of comedy. And of course, if you want real comedy, just look at Sunday night. Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders. That was funny. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance.
Well, you've heard it by now. President Trump has recommended, not ordered, not taking any emergency action, not calling for a national curfew. There's some rumors flying around out there that are just on the verge of crazy. But to my surprise, he is saying that people should not meet in groups of 10 or more, not go to restaurants, have school at home. And let me come at this from two different angles. Number one, the president is the president of the United States, and he does not want this virus to spread. He does not want there to be a high death toll in America. He does not want to overrun the healthcare system. And the way to slow this down, or as the new catchphrase is, to flatten the curve, to have this not take a massive toll, is for people to avoid social contact. And the president is going along with this wave, or going to lead the wave, recommending that we stay away from public places. There is one bit of historic correlation to this that's worth pointing out. In 1918, when that massive flu hit that took out some 60 million people in the world, probably 2% of the world's population, it was devastating. And there was devastation all over America, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia. But guess what city had a very small death rate? St. Louis. Because the minute that the first cases of that flu emerged in St. Louis, the city said, everyone stay home, self-quarantine. And you can look at a graph of the spike of the people getting sick and dying in Chicago or Philadelphia. And then in St. Louis, it was like, bloop, and that was it. The reason is because St. Louis was largely populated by the survivors of yellow fever in Memphis, Tennessee. There were 4 waves of devastating yellow fever that came through Memphis and killed thousands of people. There was a huge Italian population, Catholic population in Memphis. And when the last wave of yellow fever hit, they said, that's it, we're done. And they went up the river to St. Louis. And now there's a huge Catholic Italian population in St. Louis. People, they came from Memphis. So many of the survivors of that horrific yellow fever were alive in St. Louis at that time. And their children and their grandchildren who had heard the tragic, tear-jerking stories were alive. And they said, we know what to do. I lived through this. My mom lived through this. My grandmother lived through this. I know what I'm going to do. Everyone stay home. And so the impact in St. Louis was far less. And that is clearly what President Trump is after by asking people to stay home. Avoid groups of 10 or more. I'm telling you, people need to go to church. People need to fulfill their holy obligations. And there are churches that are canceling services. It's up to their purview. They have the governing authority to do that, whatever denomination you're in. But this is a big deal. And if we stay away from people, we can talk about that a little bit later in the show. I've got to take a break. When we come back, just for a little bit of comic relief, we'll hear what Hollywood has to say about this. Have Muslim terrorists hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam? Or is there more to the story? The answer lies in the life of one man, Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Muslim terrorists see themselves inside a 1,400-year-old story, a narrative that focuses on specific events in the life of Muhammad. We are going to look at Muhammad's life using their most sacred literature. We will look at Muhammad at the Battle of Badr. We'll see him deal with those who mock him. We'll see the times when he used deception. We'll witness Muhammad's anti-Semitism. And yes, we will discuss Muhammad and his teachings concerning sex, slavery, and jihad. Friend, if you want to understand Islamic terrorism, get this series today. There's some things that we need to remember, pearls of wisdom from the Hollywood elite. Tom Hanks, there's no crying in baseball. Tom Hanks, in case you didn't know, he and his wife, Rita Wilson, are in Australia filming, and they both have tested positive for coronavirus, and they are self-quarantining so that no one else gets sick, and they have a good attitude about it. And he actually texted, everyone's taking great care of us down here, and remember, there's no crying in baseball. And then, of course, Chris Evans, Captain America. Chris, don't break type. Captain America would not criticize President Trump at this moment. And this is, of course, why the book was written, Shut Up and Sing. Because people in the entertainment world, by and large, are just not known for their intelligence, their political acumen. I'm sure that some of them don't even know what the word acumen means. They probably think it's a spice that the Indians or somebody use on their food. I apologize. I don't mean to speak unkindly. Bette Midler believes that President Trump is lying, that he's actually carrying the coronavirus. As you probably heard, President Trump was tested because he came in a proximity of somebody who later on tested positive, and President Trump's doctor says, no, he doesn't have it. Everything is fine. And Bette Midler, yet another icon of Hollywood and music recording intelligence, is saying that President Trump is lying. I shouldn't have started off on a Hollywood note, but in some ways it's appropriate because part of me feels like I'm watching some epic picture, some film that's being set up, and obviously it's not a film. Obviously there are people who are very sick. The death toll has crossed over 6,000 people, which is a tragedy for every one of them and every one of their family members. But please forgive me, I'm going to just speak my heart plainly on this in hopes of calming some people's fears. I've been to the grocery stores in our community. I do a lot of the shopping for our family. Bare. Eggs, all but gone. Bread, all but gone. And of course, you know what? Toilet paper. I was in Costco and all the toilet paper was gone. So I was talking with Tobe over at the walk, and he said, look, Amazon's got a golden opportunity here. Deploy the drones, baby. Deploy those shipping drones from Amazon and just start dropping in toilet paper. Amazon, you're missing out on something. You can keep people home. They won't get sick. They don't need to go to the store. And everyone has TP for their TP. All right. Anyway, there's clearly a panic going on. There's clearly a little bit of hysteria going on. And some of us who are not worried or mildly worried, we're like, okay, great. Now I've got to go buy toilet paper when I can find some because people are walking out with 20 cases of it. Before, some stores have said, no, you can only have so many rolls of toilet paper and only so many Clorox little disinfectant wipes, only 2 or 3 tubs of hand sanitizer. Even fresh vegetables are gone. They will rot. All right, let's go back to the movie image. Last year, in the United States, there were 61,000 deaths from the flu. Upwards of 45 million people had the flu last year. 61,000 died. According to the CDC numbers, it was 0.7% below the requirement to call it an epidemic. Now, like you, I've been watching the news, and we are in several score. We're still under 100 Americans. Last news, under 100 Americans have died with the coronavirus flu. Remember, this is a flu, okay? We don't know how many tens of thousands are dying from other strains of the flu this winter, but it's already over 30,000, and the CDC estimates that it could come in at around 40,000 from one thing that I read. So this is where I feel like we're being had. There's more at play here. Let me take a break, and we will talk about it when I come back. But you do the math. 61,000 deaths last year from the flu. Do you remember this kind of panic? I don't. I'll be right back.
I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. Its teachings are good and peaceful. And those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah.
We have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam. Islam teaches peace.
Islam is a religion of peace. They are not Muslims, they are monsters.
We've been told that Muslim terrorists have hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam. But Islamic art and literature tell a very different story. To know the truth, we only have to study the narrative of the founder of Islam, Muhammad, in his own words. Welcome back, friend. By the way, small correction, the Johns Hopkins University is saying that there are over 7,000 worldwide deaths, and that number is going to continue to go up and approaching 100 American deaths. Last year, in America, some 45 million cases of the flu, 61,000 deaths. Now, here's where we can immediately start to use our brain and logic and also risk going into the weeds. So the way to think this through can either be the blessing to give us calm, or it can be something that gets us worked up into a little bit of worry. Interestingly, virtually every single man that I have spoken to is saying, man, there's something going on here. Come on, really? And most of the women in our circle of friends are wound tight as a drum. They are worked up. I don't know if it's because of the mother instinct. Make sure we've got food, watch the boys, wash your hands, boys, wash your hands, boys, wash your hands, boys. It's incessant. With me, did you wash your hands when you came back from the store? No, I'm sorry, I'll do it right now. So I don't know if it's machismo. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to try and cast an aspersion on the motherly instinct or on the fatherly instinct, but I'm going to play out my instincts right now because I'm a man. And I believe that we're being had. I can't put my finger on it, but math comes pretty easy to me. And when I hear people talk about buckling the U.S. health system, it's going to crumble, I think, hold on. We had 61,000 deaths last year from the flu, all right? So they're saying, if we have a spike in the numbers, it's going to make the whole system crater. All right, let's say that those 61,000 deaths occurred in a 10-week span. That's 6,000 deaths a week. I don't remember anyone talking about the system crumbling. I don't remember anyone saying we've got to build MASH-like units, field hospitals. I just don't remember because it didn't happen. So Canada has now closed its borders to us. Hey, Prime Minister Trudeau, your wife is the one who's positive, not the First Lady. Melania's not sick. And yet you're closing your borders. France has evidently told most people to stay home if they can. The city of San Francisco has told people to stay home. The state of Ohio has now closed gyms, movie theaters, restaurants in various cities are being told to close down. There was some defiance out of Nashville. The owner of Kid Rock and Tootsie's and one other one, if you've ever been to Nashville in Lower Broadway, that area, there's a whole bunch of honky-tonk restaurants, eateries, clubs where they're playing music many hours of the day. And the owner said, no, until the governor of Tennessee until Governor Lee tells every bar in the state and every restaurant in the state to close down. We're not closing. And of course, they had footage of people there saying, yeah, they were all crammed in there. We know that 61,000 died last year. We know that there was not anything, and it was 0.7% below an epidemic. And, you know, it was in the news that people were getting the flu, but in the way that it's in the news every year. So why this? Well, Randall, because you can catch it so easily. I was doing the research on flus before this coronavirus became a thing, and it was about coughing and about little sprays. So when you sneeze or even when you talk next to someone, they're little microscopic or really small bits of moisture that come out of your mouth. And if they hit someone in the face and they get in their eye or in their mouth, they might catch the flu if you've got it, or the cold. Nothing new here. This morning I read a story that says they don't know if it can be transmitted from a surface. All right, well, the flu, if you go to the CDC or other websites saying how to deal with the flu, it says you can probably get it from a surface depending on which flu virus it is. So wash your hands, don't touch your face. There's nothing new here. Oh, but no, there is something new, Randall. What's new is the death rate. Is it? May I point out the obvious? Up until very recently in the United States, there were not a lot of test, the thing that they take the test with, test kits. There weren't a lot of test kits available. So, how many people really have it? The number is far greater than we're hearing. We're hearing in the thousands right now with under 100 deaths. Listen, I can guarantee you, just doing the simple math, that there are probably 50, 100, 200,000, maybe there's already 1 million people who are carrying it. But here's what we don't know. How many of them will never get symptomatic? How many of them will the symptoms be so light that they won't go get tested? Oh, what does that remind you of? The flu every year. So when they started off saying that this was a 2% death rate, where did those numbers come from? They came from China, our enemy. There are people that are reporting that this is a bug that escaped from a Chinese lab, or that the bats that they were testing in this lab, dead bat meat, was being taken out of the facility and sold on the black market. Who knows? We don't know how many people have the virus right now. So therefore, we don't know what the death rate is. Yes, Italy's numbers are frightening. I'm going to take a break. We'll talk about that when we come back. Don't go away. What Would Mohammed Do? Islamic Terrorism Explained is the best movie series documentary ever produced on the life of Muhammad and Islam. How do I know? Because it's what critics are saying. John Moore, radio host and author, said, I learned more from What Would Mohammed Do about Islam and Islamic terrorism than I've learned from everything I ever read and watched in my entire life. Best-selling author Dr. Bill Warner said, What Would Mohammed Do is the best movie series, TV production on the life of Muhammad and Islamic terrorism that has ever been produced. Friends, this is what the experts are saying. No one has ever done what we've done. I encourage you to get 1, 2, 4 copies. Call 304-289-3700. That's 304-289-3700, or order it at the address or the website that you see on the screen. We've been told that Muslim terrorists have hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam. But Islamic art and literature tell a very different story. To know the truth, we only have to study the narrative of the founder of Islam, Muhammad, in his own words. Welcome back, friend. All right, we were talking about Italy. I've got to make this fast because I've got to move on to some other stuff. The reason that the Italian numbers are so important to us is because Italy has a similar culture to ours as far as food, cleanliness, medical care, and their numbers are spiking right now. So go back to 1918 with the worldwide flu epidemic, and you can see a graph of what happened in Chicago, and then about a week or 10 days later, the same wave hit St. Louis, but St. Louis learned from Chicago's mistakes. And the St. Louis graph went like this, and the death rate was far less. We are trying to compare what is happening in Italy to what is happening here, and the Surgeon General of the United States said that we're about 2 weeks behind where Italy is with the spread of the disease, the containment of the disease, the treatment of the disease. So that whole notion of flattening the curve like St. Louis did in 1918 compared to Chicago, we're trying to do that in comparison to Italy. We'll keep following this, but I've got to switch gears for a minute to politics because it's just not going to go away. The Democrat leadership have already said they want to take President Trump out, and now they're prepared to use the coronavirus to do it. The CNN debate on Sunday night with Bernie and Biden was disgusting. It was embarrassing because they spent so much time at the beginning lobbing these softballs to these two guys about how horrible President Trump has handled this coronavirus and how they could rise to the occasion and be the superheroes that at the helm of the presidency would crush the coronavirus, save the day and save the United States. And Captain America would be standing right there with them. It was disgusting. It really was. So the president is the president. And he was never a politician, but he has become one. He's a quick learner. He knows what they're trying to do to him. And I hope and pray that what he's saying is what's best for the country is most important. Hopefully what's best for the country would be what's best for his presidency. Maybe not. Maybe he has to fall on his sword. But if the stock market continues to tank, if businesses begin to shutter, they're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. As you know, the Fed is now somewhere between 0.25%. They're just dishing out money to banks. There's people floating the idea of the federal government cutting a check directly to every American adult who's a voter, who's a true American citizen, of $1,000, $500 for every kid. This is probably not going to happen. The tax breaks that they're talking about could help, but there's going to be, if this continues apace, there's going to be businesses that are in real trouble. There's a lot of us that are going to continue to go to the gym. We're going to continue to do what we do. We're going to continue to go to church. Sure, we'll avoid some things, but we're in this. So the very fact that we're discussing giving away this money, tax breaks, shows, and the cratering of the stock market shows that people are nervous. Now the questions are coming to President Trump. Is this going to be a recession? I promise you, the Democrats are going to seize on this, which leads me to my final point. And I'm going to begin by asking questions because I will cover this in the coming days. We know that there is a God in heaven. At the end of chapter 28 of the book of Deuteronomy, the chapter on blessings and curses, the last curse is that you will be afraid. You'll be racked with fear. And it says, in the morning you will say, oh, I wish it were night. And in the night you will say, oh, I wish it was morning. It talks about fear gripping them. Fear can be a sign of God's judgment. Now, I want to stop the coronavirus. I'd like to stop all flus. But today, in this country, over 3,000 babies were brutally murdered by abortion. Now, maybe a little bit less because some abortion mills aren't scheduling the death of children because of their own fear of the coronavirus. Think of the alarm. Think of what we're doing, and then think of the blood of the innocent that is crying out to God for vengeance. Is there some connection? Is it foolishness on our part that we would think that our economy is going to grow strong while we wade through streams of innocent blood to get there? Are we so foolish as to think that there's not a God in heaven who will bring justice? Just some thoughts for you. I'll be back. Let's pray. Let's be smart. God bless you.